An advisory opinion, such as the one issued by the ICJ, achieves its purpose only when it is implemented. On the 23rd of July 2025, the International Court of Justice issued its advisory opinion on the obligations of states in respect of climate change. On this day, the court made one thing clear: climate change is a matter of law. States are legally obliged to prevent, to mitigate, and remedy climate harm under customary international law, human rights law, and the law of state responsibility. This marks an important shift. The protection of climate system is no longer left to political discretion or voluntary pledges. It is a legal duty that is enforceable under international law.
The African Union has been proactive in shaping a strong continental response to climate change, consistent with the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Let me remind some of our key initiatives among many others. First, we have the African Climate Change and Resilient Development Strategy and Action Plan 2022-2032, guiding member states towards resilient and low-carbon development. Second, let me mention the Africa Blue Economy Strategy, advancing sustainable use of our oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers. The Great Green Wall Initiative, that aims to restore degraded lands and improve livelihoods of our brothers and sisters across Africa. The fourth point that I would mention is the strong collaboration through the African Group of Negotiators and African Adaptation Initiative, and as well as the ongoing work to operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund for Africa's benefit. Through these frameworks, the African Union continues to integrate climate, environment, and sustainable development into one coherent vision.
As African Union, we went there first to fight for principles. And we were able to have an advisory opinion of the court that has been very strong on principles. In particular, 4 principles that are very important for the African continent. First, the principle of sustainable development. The court has recognized that the principle of sustainable development forms an integral part of the climate change regime and informs the obligations and the rights of states when it comes to the fight against global warming. And this was very important for the African continent because, as developing countries and some of us least developed countries, we need our right to sustainable development to be recognized. Africa has almost not contributed at all to the problem. It's important also that the right to development, the right to sustainable development of African states is preserved. And the court has recognized that the principle of sustainable development is one of the principles that applies when it comes to the fight against global warming. As for many years, you would go to climate change negotiations, and some states, particularly developed states, would say that equity was not part of the corpus juris, that it was not a legal principle, that it was just abstract goal, abstract political objective. And the court, in its advisory opinion, has acknowledged that equity is actually a legal principle that applies in the context of the climate change regime and in the context, again, of climate change obligations. And this is very important for us. Why? Because what do we need as African countries? We need adaptation. Mitigation is not really the biggest problem here on the continent because African countries, once again, are not emitting that much. So what most of our countries need is adaptation. We need to make sure that developed countries adopt proactive adaptation policies that allow our countries to build climate resilient societies. And in order to impose this type of obligations to more developed states, well, we need this principle of equity to be recognized as a legal principle. That this is not charity. It is not charity when developed states think about, for instance, putting funding, climate finance in adaptation. This is not charity. This is not a choice. It's an obligation in the name of a legal principle that is equity. And the court has recognized that. States should have obligations, yes, but we need to recognize that in the implementation of those obligations, there should be a certain level, a certain extent, a certain degree of differentiation. Why? Because once again, not all states historically are responsible of the problem. Not all states historically and currently are responsible of the harm that has been caused to the climate system. So differentiation is fundamental. Obligations, yes, but not all states should be subject to the same level of obligation when it comes to the due diligence that states have to exercise with respect to the climate system. We need to acknowledge that not all states have the same capabilities, and so differentiation is fundamental in the interpretation and application of climate obligations. And the court has recognized that the principle of CBDR is a principle that forms an integral part of the climate change regime. The principle of intergenerational equity. So the need to make sure that present generations satisfy their needs without compromising the needs of future generations.